Welcome to Tower Talk Business Radio, where we bring you conversations with the top business minds on Long Island and around the nation every week. Featuring expert consultants and small business owners who have found success but are also willing to share their top tips, failures, and give gritty, matter-of-fact advice based on their firsthand experience. Now, let's get down to business on Tower Talk Business Radio on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hello and welcome to Tower Talk Business Radio. My name is Ray Schwetz, AVP of Business Banking at Jovia Financial Credit Union, along with Donyshia Boston-Hill, CEO, keeper of the brand, marketing, and digital agency.
We're focused on being the premier resource for business and entrepreneurship. We bring you weekly business advice, tips, tools, and services to help you grow your business. Plus, we interview the top business leaders and community leaders in the industry.
I'm so psyched about today.
Private Benjamin, reporting for duty, Ray?
So we're very grateful today to have Father Peter Pomposello, and he's a Catholic priest who is a recruiter for the heroic calling of the Army Chaplain.
Ray, Donyshia, thanks so much for having me.
You have such a cool story. Can you share with us just a little bit about kind of your background, your childhood in Staten Island?
Sure. So, I grew up in Staten Island, son of a New York City cop, and my mom stayed home to raise me and my two sisters. I guess I always had on my heart, because of my father's service, I think it really goes back to that. My father was an example of service, for the MIPD, although he never wanted me to become a cop. He was like, you're going to college, you're doing something else. But I was attracted to the Army very much. And I went to ROTC at Brooklyn Polytech, and I was commissioned an officer, and I had hoped to go on active duty. But it was the end of the first Gulf War. There was no real opportunity. I was depressed for about 10 minutes and said, I guess I'm getting a job. And I became a public school teacher while I continued to drill with the reserves. And then I took a hard right turn. God kind of put it on my heart, and I really received a call to serve in a deeper way. Not just as a school teacher or as a soldier in the Army Reserves, but to become a priest. So I left everything and I started my studies. And then, long story short, here we are together. Here we are in Long Island, and I'm in uniform. I'm on a recruiting mission. I'm looking for men to be soldiers and soldiers to be priests, to be all they can be. And that's what my full-time job is now for the next 24 months or so.
Wow.
Tell us, how did you get specifically into the recruiting an Army chaplain? Like, honestly, it's just not something that I generally put together as the layperson,
Right. So I guess it's important for your audience to know that so chaplains serve the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. Congress makes no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise of religion. The Chaplain Corps represents the faiths of all the soldiers, and every chaplain is responsible for the spiritual well-being of their soldiers, either to provide for them. So as a priest, for example, I'm a Catholic priest. So if I have a Catholic soldier, it's easy. I can administer the sacraments to him or her. I can prepare them for marriage or baptism because they're Catholic and I'm Catholic. But of course, I'm going to have soldiers who are not Catholic. Right. So I need to advise them as to, okay, where's a chaplain that they can talk to? Where is their faith group leader that they can get in touch with? And we work as diligently for both to serve the needs. That's the key. That's the secret to good chaplaincy, is to realize that you have to serve your own faith and serve it well and in authenticity, but also in being authentic and true to your own religion. You have to respect the rights and the love that other people have for their religion, and to help them, in their direction as well. And it's not to say that I'm evangelizing for any other faith. It's to say that we're respecting people for the faith that they have. If they want to engage me and they want to say, hey, why do I want to become Catholic? Okay, we can have that conversation. But if you say, hey, I need halal meals, we're going to the field, and I'm Muslim, I'm like, okay, let's put in the paperwork and let's get it done. And that's the extent of how it goes.
Wow.
I'm looking at you, and the audience can't see you, and I'm just replaying my childhood days of MASH while I stand up and watching that. Surprising that you didn't know about the chaplains in the Army.
Well, not in that way, not in depth. And I'm wondering, though, how do you transition from being a soldier, being trained as a soldier, to now being trained as someone who has to work with someone spiritually and has to recruit others to do so.
And I'm not a trigger puller anymore. As an infantry officer, I was a combatant. That's what I did. I was trained to be a combatant. I didn't deploy or anything as an infantry officer, but that was the training, that was the focus.
Right.
But now, as a chaplain, a non-combatant, which I think is a very powerful role, and I love that the United States Army wants and requires all of the chaplains in the United States Army and our armed forces, for that matter, to be non-combatants, because we stand in support of the mission, to support and defend the Constitution and to engage the enemy and to fight our nation's wars. And yet we don't bear the direct burden of violence that we call upon our men and women to bear. And that's a heavy burden. When you're in an airport and you see a soldier in uniform and you thank them for their service, you're thanking them for bearing the burden of being away from family, being away from loved ones, and some of them have to bear the consequences of the violence that they've had to employ. And there's a burden to that. It's not something that's meant to be between, people of different nations, but because of our fallen state and there's sin in the world and there's conflict, unfortunately, sometimes conflict as a last resort, it needs to be resolved even violently. And that's a tough one for a lot of people to square and to reconcile.
And so what is your day like and how do people find you?
So as a recruiter, the best way to get me is fr.UncleSam on Instagram, or you can go to goarmy.com/chaplains. But the best way to contact me directly is on Instagram. And I'm looking for young men that are thinking about the priesthood. I'm looking for priests who are considering sharing the sacrifice of their priesthood with soldiers as chaplains in the United States Army or reserves or active duty. But this is a special job. Like, I'll only do this for about 24 months. I'll go back to actually being on the line with soldiers. I was 3 years in Alaska. I jumped out of airplanes in Alaska for 3 years as a chaplain. And it was a great time. And then I was a paratrooper in Kentucky, and I deployed 5 times from my unit in Kentucky. But then this was a special assignment. It's like, hey, we need you to kind of go shake the tree and help with the recruiting effort. And I'm honored to do it. It's wonderful, and it kind of helps me reconnect really with the church side of things, because I have such a beautiful view of the church in all the states and all the cathedrals and all these dioceses, asking them, really begging these bishops to consider allowing a priest to come into service. I met with your local bishop here, Bishop Barris.
Yes,
and he's very generous. He's very open to the idea of chaplains, of soldiers coming into service, and I'm so grateful to that.
And it's such a necessary and needed service. I'm really thinking of someone that I met a couple years ago at the Crest Hollow. He was somebody who was working there part-time, and he's a veteran. And, when I found out he was a veteran, I said, thank you for your service. And I always feel like I do mean that from the heart, but at the same time, it's like, that's all I can do. Like, shouldn't I be doing something more for this person that's done so much for us? And sometimes you don't even realize what that burden must be like. And as we're talking, he started kind of opening up, and he said it's been hard to adjust and all that. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, like, this poor guy, like, okay, I was happy to talk with him, and hopefully that helped in some regard, but I had no idea, like, what do I do to kind of help him spiritually, or where do I point him? So what you do is just so vital to people like that while they're on the front line. What advice would you give to someone like me who's looking to help someone like that? Like, how do I make them? I know there's no easy answer. Like, how do you make them feel better? But how do you help them?
Right, and I guess it depends on if you know somebody personally and they're struggling. Yeah. I think it's good to address it head on. Say, I don't know what it's like to go through what you went through, but are you getting help? Helping them to talk. Everybody needs to talk. That's what's going to solve it, really. I mean, like, yes. They need to know. They need to be with people they know, they love, and they trust. And if that's their, if it's their spouse, if it's their minister, they need people they know, love, and trust that they can talk this through. And there's all sorts of resources out there, for that. Our servicemen and women, our soldiers, they sacrifice to the point of loss. They lose things. And I don't want to say it's all gloom and doom, but think of what they sacrifice. They never get back their kid's second birthday. They never get back, the anniversary that they missed. They never get back that Christmas that they were deployed. And they never get back that sense of wholeness and well-being that comes that's inherent to all of us. But and thanks be to God, we have good training, but we train them in violence to be violent, and it's necessary, and we do it without apology. And it's such a mystery. And I know that's a mystery coming from the mouth of a priest, too. They're like, this priest is talking about, shooting the enemy in the face. And I'm like, yeah, well, it's the stark reality of what it takes to support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Yes. You are listening to Tower Talk Business Radio on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ray Schwetz, along with Donyshia Boston-Hill, and our guest today is Father Peter Pomposello, and he is the Army recruiter for the Army chaplains. So, one of the things you mentioned to me that I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around is that you as a non-combatant in your role here, does that continue then when you're done with this aspect of your job, at the end of that 24-month period?
Oh, so I'll go right back to, I'll go to another level of chaplaincy. So real briefly,
yes.
Like the bottom of the pyramid, think of a pyramid in which you need a whole bunch of captain chaplains to serve the troops. But then supervising those captains are major chaplains that supervise them, and then supervising the major chaplains would be lieutenant colonels, and it goes up the rank. But you need less of the higher ranks as you go up the pyramid. And so I'm on that second level of the pyramid. I go from having been a battalion chaplain in Alaska and in Kentucky, now I'll become a brigade chaplain. Hopefully, if anybody's listening out there, get me to Italy. I want to jump out of airplanes in Italy, but that's just the dream.
And so, what are those conversations like? You always see, a recruiter sitting in an office speaking to a young man or woman about serving their country. Now, this is probably a different conversation. How does that go?
Yes, it's a very different conversation. It's particularly, I have a particular niche at being a priest, because let's just set aside the priest part of it. And most chaplains, let's just talk about the chaplain corps in general. Most chaplains, most men and women who become chaplains, they're motivated to serve God and country. They're leaders of their own faith group, and it's their own decision. It's their own personal decision. Maybe if they're married, it's a decision that they make with their spouse, and they say, you know what, I think this would be a great way for us to serve in ministry. I'm gonna apply to the Army Chaplain Corps. I have the education, I have the ministerial experience, and let's make a gift of ministry to the Army. That's their decision. Now let's bring it to my mission is a bit of a niche, because I need not only a priest who's willing to serve, but his bishop needs to allow him, to permit him to be released from his work as a priest to do this in the Army. And then together, with that consent of his own bishop, then he has to petition the Archbishop for the Military Services with all his credentialing to be selected and endorsed to do this work. So it's not just one person saying yes, it's three people saying yes. And it's a deep ask. And it's genuinely a sacrifice of the bishops themselves, because, I mean, let's face it, who am I looking for? I'm looking for men that are physically fit, they're young enough, they're physically fit, and they have the ability to meet the challenges of this kind of austere missionary work. So so thanks a lot, Father. You want my youngest and my brightest to come and take him out of the parish? This guy's doing great things for me. I can't, so it's important to realize and be grateful for the sacrifice that bishops make for sending their priests to the Army.
And again, though, so necessary. I can imagine there's lots of different stories about how you've made an impact out in the field. Can you share with us some stories about some of the folks that you've worked with in the chaplaincy and how that's worked?
Sure. You know what? I'd say the most important thing that you have to do as a chaplain is to just be present. You got to be out there. You got to be with them. And it goes such a long way. If you're with them in situations that they know inherently, what are you doing here? You don't have to be here. It's pouring rain. They're loading trucks. We're waiting for buses to come. And you're just out there kind of hanging out and say, oh, can I give you a hand with that? And they're like, Chaplain, what are you doing here? I'm like, well, you're here. Let's get this done together. That's how you win them over. That sets the table for ministry. I can't just come running at you with a Bible and a crucifix and say, hey, let's talk about God. I mean, that's not going to work. That's going to turn people off. And forget it. If I think I'm going to be relevant sitting in my office and twiddling my thumbs thinking like, well, nobody came and knocked on my door today, Donyshia. How come nobody's coming to see me and talk to the chaplain? You got to go out and go work where they work. They're turning wrenches in the motor pool. Go and turn wrenches with them in the motor pool. If they're shooting mortars and they're doing their weapon systems, you want to engage with soldiers, talk to them about their job. They love talking about their job, whatever their job is. The radio man's going to talk to you about his radio. The rifleman's going to talk to you about his tactics and the classes that he has to take and what he's doing to clear a room. And it's exciting and it's fun to kind of engage in that level with them. And then after, I'll give you a quick story.
Yeah.
I did a jump. I'm a jump master for paratroopers. So I inspect their equipment and I lead them literally out the door of the aircraft, right? I put them out the door of the aircraft and then I jump after them. After this whole jump was over, a soldier came up to me and he was like, Chaplain, this was really cool. Like, I had a great day with you. Can I talk to you about something? Now, can you imagine where those conversations go? Can I talk to you about something? And now it's hey, I'm really struggling. My mother died and I really miss her. Hey, I've got great news. I'm getting married and can you do my wedding? Or, hey, my wife's pregnant. But those conversations, they might not have had those conversations with me had I not been with them all day long, drawing parachutes, loading on the plane, cramped in the aircraft, jumping out. That's where it's just such a beautiful and real ministry of leadership to these soldiers and leadership to their commanders, because now you win over their bosses too. That gains you currency with the people who lead them. And I can advise their commanders, like how beautiful it is when a commander of those soldiers says, Chaplain, I want your perspective on this.
Yes.
And I can help advise them, in situations that can be difficult. And they can take or leave my advice, but they've asked for it. They're only going to ask for it if I'm working hard for them. And the only way I'm going to work hard for them is to jump out of airplanes and load trucks and be around and be present. And it's not going to be sitting in an office.
Now, is there two tracks? It sounds like the track from, someone who's in a local church or parish, and then there's people who are already in the military.
So you have to be released from your church, for the Catholic priest, he needs to be released from his diocese to the archdiocese for the military services. There's two ways of doing it. Full-time ministry is active duty. I'm on active duty. My ministry is full-time. This is what I do full-time, and that's what a chaplain would do full-time. There is part-time ministry in the Army Reserves, and that's a great thing for your listeners. If you're a minister out here and you're hearing this and you're saying, wow, I want to serve, but I don't want to give up my parish ministry. You don't have to. You can do it part-time, and you can serve your local parish community, and then 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks out of the year, you serve in an Army Reserve unit, and you serve God and country in that way. So you can do both, but for active duty, it's full-time ministry.
Now, you also hear that there's age restrictions to everything you do. So,
correct.
18 to sign up. What is the age? Like, what is the ceiling for you?
So, the bottom line is that chaplains do come in a bit older because they're direct commissions for the skill set that they provide. So think about it this way. The Army needs doctors, dentists, lawyers, and they get directly commissioned because of their qualifications being in that profession. And it's the same thing for clergy. We take them in, so they do tend to be a little bit older. Generally speaking, we want a chaplain to be 42 is like top end for active duty service, because the Army wants the potential for them to retire at 62 and do a full 20 years. But that being said, things can be waived. So if you're a priest hearing this and you go, I'm 45, I'm fine, I'm 48, I'm 50, I can't do this. No. Get in touch with me. fr.UncleSam on Instagram. GoArmy.com/chaplains, or you can even email priestrecruitereast@gmail.com and you can get in touch with me.
You're listening to Tower Talk Business Radio. Our guest today is Father Peter Pomposello, Army Chaplain Recruiter. My name is Donyshia Boston-Hill, along with Ray Schwetz on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
I think Denise is trying to get me enlisted. I think that's why she was asking about that.
I don't know if your wife would like that, but we could definitely talk about it.
So I wanted to ask you, I imagine there being your role in the priesthood and your role as a soldier, so there's got to be some misconceptions about a lot of what you do. What would you say is kind of the biggest misconception about your role now?
Ooh, that's it. I like that question a lot because there is a misconception of chaplains.
Yes.
That there's some kind of requirement to be pluralistic in your religion. What I mean by that is that you don't actually serve your own conscience and the religion that you truly believe in. You kind of make it a mishmash of this generalization of we don't want to offend anybody and we're going to just be ecumenical with everyone, and it's going to be just this baseline, almost kind of like just middle of the road general religion. We're not going to talk, and nothing could be further from the truth. Mm-hmm. A chaplain is called to live his or her true authenticity as a religious minister. That's what they boarded you for. This is why you've become a chaplain in the Army, to truly live your call. You got to live your calling, and if your calling coincides with your soldiers, that's great, but if it doesn't, then you provide for that soldier to get to someone who lives the call that they're living. Everybody has their own call. And so for me, I'm called to be a Catholic priest, and I'm called to call Catholics to live an authentic sacramental life. And that's where I'm at. But if there are others that, have other religious needs, yes, they're satisfied by other chaplains.
Understood. I wonder also, you mentioned some of the challenges, obviously, in recruiting and going through 3 different levels of approvals to kind of get folks involved. What are the biggest challenges that you face outside in the field doing the work that you do?
Oh, you mean like the practical, like what's it like to be?
Yeah.
Well, the creature comforts of home are a reality when we go to the field. I can pack my mass kit. I have it in the car. It's no bigger than maybe a ream of paper. If you think about it, like a ream of paper, folded on itself, that would be the brick that I'm carrying. Think of a ream of paper folded on itself, and I have everything that I need in there to say Mass in the most austere environments. I've said Mass at minus 20 below. I've said Mass, in the desert. I've said Mass on top of mountains, in swamps. I've said Mass everywhere. So you have to be creative, and you have to be willing to kind of, all right, what am I going to do? If I'm going to bring this stuff that I need for Mass, it needs to fit in this rucksack that I'm going to jump out of this airplane with. So I can't bring this big wooden altar that looks really nice. I'm going to have to, it's going to be small. It's going to be bare bones. And that's a bit of a challenge. And also, along with that challenge is to give them an experience of the divine and give them an experience of God without the advantages of stained glass and beautiful artwork and beautiful music and an organist. And so you have to be creative, and we have to appreciate where we are, and that we're sacrificing that. But, we do it with song, and we do it with praise to Almighty God.
And now, is it an impromptu service, or is it a combination of you have set services or deliver the word?
I'm glad you mentioned that, because things can be impromptu, but the best of chaplain work, we work as a team. It's called a unit ministry team, and I would have an enlisted soldier that helps me promote what we're doing as a team. He's going to go or she's going to go and make sure that they put up little notes. An easy way to do this is like, pro tip is to write it on an index card and tape it on all the bathroom mirrors or all the bathroom doors, wherever, all the porta potties if we're out in the field. And chaplain is given religious service at such and such a time by this tent, so that we need to advertise. And it's difficult, and it's a real challenge in the field because nobody has a cell phone. Nobody has, nobody's texting. Everybody's scattered all over the place. So we have to get to them when they eat their meals. I stand at the head of the chow line. Hey, I'm saying Mass, like before every meal, I'm saying Mass every day. I'm going to hear confessions and say Mass before every dinner meal. And they're like, oh, you did it today? I said, yes, I'll do it again tomorrow. I'll do it again the next day. And that's a great collection point. It's a what we call a choke point for ministry, so that everybody knows what's going on. It's useless. How useless would it be if I go out there, I say Mass in front of a tree for 2 people, and then I'm gone, and it's like, oh, the chaplain was here? I didn't know about it. So a good chaplain, a religious affairs specialist, I called him a chaplain assistant. That's the old term, but a good religious affairs specialist will help a chaplain advertise to get the crowd. Our job, and here's my, I measure success or failure as long as you knew I was there, you don't have to come and talk to me. You don't want to go to Mass, that's fine. But you knew I was there. You knew I was there. If I show up and then I leave and you didn't know I was there, I failed you. I want you to have the opportunity to engage me or not engage me. And I think that there's a value to my just being present. I'm just there. You know, this soldier walks in with this cross on his shoulder. It's like, it reminds the soldiers of God. It reminds these soldiers of you know, the love that they ought to have for God. And that's enough sometimes.
Yes. And it's so funny when Donyshia said impromptu, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I wonder if you've had to perform sacraments or perform Mass on a plane on your way to go out.
Well, so I've had, when you say impromptu or unplanned, I mean, I've had the sad honor to bless soldiers on what's called a hero flight, you know, where they died in battle and I blessed their bodies and it's called a ramp ceremony. It's difficult. Nobody wants to do that, but it's what we train for and it's what we prepare for. And what a consolation that can be for the families back home. When all of this is over, and months later, when I'm back home, I can go find that mother and father and say, I was there for your son. I blessed his body. I wanted you to know that. I mean, that's an extreme sense of consolation for those parents in such dire, horrible circumstances. Right. I mean, but what else could be said? What else could be done? But not only was the Army there for them, the church was there for them in that hour of need.
And is that normal practice? Because I know you see people walking to the door, hearing the news, the phone rings. Is there just a program where you automatically follow up with the family? Is that part of the services?
I think that's good protocol. And you always want to meet. You always want to meet a family where they're at. Maybe they don't want to hear from. Maybe they're so done, they're angry. So we can coordinate with other teams of soldiers that have been working with the family, and I can reach out to them and say, hey, are they open to a visit from the chaplain? And they'll be like, oh, yeah, are you kidding me? They would love to talk to you. Or, no, now's not the time, but, well, can you give them this note? It's like, okay, yeah, I can get that. You know, however you want to meet with them. However you want to meet with them doesn't matter. It's how they want to meet with you is what matters.
Can you tell us once again how people can find you?
Sure, you can get me on Instagram is the best way to get me, fr.UncleSam, Father Uncle Sam, on Instagram, or you can find out more information on goarmy.com/chaplains. priestrecruitereast@gmail.com is my email.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Father Peter. We really, this was fantastic. Thank you again.
Thanks so much for the opportunity to you know, you're co-recruiters now. You've just been enlisted. You're helping us find men to be soldiers, soldiers to be priests, and priests to be all they can be.
And we're happy for the higher cause.
Yes, we are. I'd like to leave you with DB's philosophy. Prayer strikes the winning blow. Service is simply picking up the pieces. S.D. Gordon.
I want to thank you for being with us. My name is Ray Schwetz, along with Donyshia Boston-Hill, your co-host and producers. Visit nccradio.org for more information. We're available on Odyssey, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, as a podcast in iTunes, Android Podcasts, and Spreaker. This has been Tower Talk Business Radio on the voice of National Community College, 90.3 WHPC.